Hello everybody, this is Zecoa the Diesel, and welcome to Thomas and Friends Season 5 Reviewed. So now we're coming to the second part of the classic era, and what I like to call the Britt and David era. It started off a little bit in Season 3 with some original episodes, but this is a season where from now on pretty much all Thomas episodes will have original stories, outside of a few magazine episodes here and there. Also, I have to mention that this season is not only my favorite season of the whole show, but this is a season that got me into Thomas in the first place. I know pretty much all the episodes by heart. I remember all the scenes from every episode, and I can remember which episodes I liked the most. So to help me out with this season to keep the review more fair and balanced, I have a good friend of mine that I decided to review this season with me. Please introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, Jonathan here. You may know me as that Toy Bunny guy, and I'm really excited to review Season 5 of Thomas the Tank Engine in friends with my good friend Zecoa. Thank you for inviting me to review the season with you. It's so good to be here, man.
No problem, thank you for being here. Alright, so how this crossover is going to work is pretty much the same as the last season reviews. We'll both watch and review all the episodes in Season 5, going over the basic plot of each episode, what we like, didn't like, and give our own ratings for these episodes. We'll also be taking turns on reviewing the episodes as we go along. One of us will go first on what we thought of a certain episode, and once one of us is done giving our little thoughts and a rating of the episode, then the next person will give any extra thoughts they have on the episode, and then give their own rating for the episode. So, Toy Bonnie, what is your experience with Season 5?
My history with this season is pretty basic. I purchased the Races, Rescues, and Runaways DVD and VHS, and the Make Someone Happy DVD, and the Spills and Chills DVD from Costco, when they had a DVD section of course, and Sam's and New Walmart. I started watching Season 5 when I got home, and when I first saw it, man, I felt bored because it was not what I was expecting originally. I was expecting it to be one of the new Season 6 episodes, but there were just Season 5 episodes in it. But as a kid, I didn't like the season too much, and I tended to skip it due to my lack of interest in it. But after a few years later, and I started liking the season a lot, and I also enjoyed the songs of the season like Night Train, The Snow Song, and Harold the Helicopter. And as of today, 2018, I think Season 5 is a great way for Thomas fans who never grew up with the original Railway series books. I mean, I never read the Railway series books until June 2012, man. So what's your history on the season, Zecoa? Let's hear what you have to say.
Well, as I previously stated, this was the first season that got me into Thomas in the first place. Like Toy Bonnie, I discovered this season by buying Races, Rescues, and Runaways on VHS. And from the episodes that were present on the VHS, it really made me a die-hard Thomas fan as a kid. And even when I was in middle school, I would still watch these episodes from time to time. Now, it has been a long time since I've seen these episodes, but I still remember most of them by heart. And are they as good as I remember them? Well, the only way to find out is to watch these episodes again. Now, if you're new to this channel and you don't know how I rate each episode of a show, check out my Seasons 1 and 2 review on Thomas the Tank Engine, as well as a video explaining in more detail on how I rate a certain episode.
Now, the ratings are taken from my Thomas and Friends Season 1 review, some of my ratings actually, and the episodes are gonna be judged with 1 to 3 ratings. The good episode means that the episode was good and had an amazing plot that was enjoyable. The weak episode means that it was alright but had a weak moment or wasn't very good to sit through. Or the horrible episode means that the episode was bad, used Sharon Miller's 3 strikes and out formula, or a specific reason I'll explain as I review the episode. So yeah, that's basically my ratings I used from the Season 1 review I made actually.
Also, keep in mind that both mine and Toy Bonnie's ratings will be different for some episodes of this season. And like I always said, it's okay to agree or disagree with a person's opinion on an episode, so don't worry if you feel all the episodes will be the same ratings. Also, before we get started, here are some fun facts about this season. Like I said, this is the first season where not one episode is based on the Railway series, as the Reverend Audrey passed away after Season 4, and now Britt and David are basically free to write whatever stories they want to write. This is also the second time, and also the first ever season, to have non-Railway series characters on the show, like Cranky or Thumper. The first time was in the last season with Smudger. Now, even though there are no Railway series stories, there are some stories that are based on real-life events. We'll let you know which episodes are based on real-life events when we get to them. This is also David Mayton's only season as the railway constructor for the show. We wouldn't see another railway consultant until season 17. Also, because last season was George Carlin's last season as the narrator for the US, we have a new US narrator, Alec Baldwin, as well as a new spin-off show for Thomas in the US called Storytime with Thomas. which I don't even know who remembers this show. I think it's more forgotten than Shiny Time Station. Also, according to David Mitton before he passed away, this season was supposed to be some sort of showcase with Thomas and the Magic Railroad. This season and the movie was Britt's last season to be both the head writer and producer for the show. She does stick around a little bit for season 6, but this is the season where she stopped being the writer after this season. And last but not least, this is the last season to be made by the Britt Allcroft Company before Hit Entertainment set its eyes on buying the show from Britt. Alright, that's enough fun facts, so let's get right into the episodes. Episode 105, Cranky Bugs. We meet a cranky crane named, well, Cranky. So this is the first episode of Season 5, and it's a pretty good episode to start off the season. And this episode will actually show you on how Season 5 will be later on. First, let's talk about Cranky. For an introduction for the character, it's a good one. There are a couple of funny moments with Cranky between Thomas and Percy, but he still gets his justified comeuppance in the episode. Also, that scene with the boat heading towards the engines used to scare me a lot as a kid, and is a decent scene with some great music and a good build-up. So with some good scenes and some funny moments, I give this episode an 8 out of 10 for a good episode.
I do agree with you, Zecoa. This episode is a great way to begin Season 5 and to introduce the first non-Audrey character, actually. I laughed so hard when Cranky roasted Thomas, saying that you must have known my arm can't reach you there. So yeah, I say this is a good episode too, man. Episode 106, Horrid Lorry. 3 lorries take over the engine's jobs and they end up being smashed, broken, and sunk on their first day on Sodor. I see this episode was really funny at the beginning where Cranky roasted another character like in the previous episode. This episode also marked the debut of a cameo character in the model series, but he'll be an actual character in the later series. I'm of course talking about Butch the Breakdown Vehicle. Now, I see this episode as one small problem. It's not that big of a deal, it's just a small problem. It's just that the boys versus girls thing is introduced in this season. And yes, it does remind me of a future Thomas episode that should not be even mentioned here. But with that small problem, this is not a bad episode to be called good. And I like the lorries being wrecked, smashed, and broken. That's so funny. I also like how the lorries are being rude to the engines, and it's Toby's expression, like when the lorry fell. It was so funny. And even the driver, when it fell out of the lorry, rotten roads, that was so funny as well. So yeah, this is a good episode for me. I love it.
I don't really get a boys versus girls vibe with this episode, seeing how all the characters are males. But there is one thing that bothers me about the episode. Now, I don't know if this was intentional, but I feel like the moral is a bad moral featuring the lorries. But don't get me wrong, the lorries were being rude to the engines, and they deserve the karma they got in this episode. But I feel like the episode is saying we don't need road vehicles, period. Now yes, the railway is good for the economy, but so are road vehicles. There's only a few places where engines won't be able to get to, and they need a road vehicle to make their deliveries. We can't always rely on trains to make our deliveries safe and sound. Again, I don't think that was the message they were going for, but it's hard to ignore, and I'm gonna have to dock a few points for it. But there were still some decent moments in the episode, and I'll give the episode a 6 out of 10 for a good episode. Episode 107, A Better View for Gordon. Sir Topham Hatt chooses Gordon to test the news station. This was a pretty solid episode. We once again see Gordon in his usual boasting self, but at the same time, you do feel sorry for him every time he breaks down, and they don't make him a complete jerk in this episode. Plus, I give the episode massive points for building up on the crash near the end of the episode. We also get to see some actual injuries happen after this crash. Seriously, go look at Gordon's crew and Sir Topham Hatt in this episode after the crash. And this is the first episode in Season 5 to be based on a real-life event. The accident this episode is based on is an accident that happened in France on October 22nd, 1895. If you're curious, just go look up on Wikipedia or just Google it yourself. So, I give this episode an 8 out of 10 for a good episode.
This was the first episode I saw of Season 5, and also the first in which the new station known as Kirk Roningham replaces Navarre Station as a default station. I love the crash in this episode. It's so good. And at least no one was hurt. Catchphrase is not here. It's just that this episode's great. It's so great. I love that crash scene, and this episode based on the real life event is also very interesting. Like, I didn't even know that this episode is based on a real life event. And if you want to see the photograph of the crash, it's somewhere on Google, or I can post it on your screen right now. So yeah, look it up on Google, or I'll post it on top of your screen right now. Episode 108, Lady Hatt's birthday party. The Fat Controller has trouble arriving to his wife's birthday party. Another solid episode is what we got here. It shows how bad days turn out to be what you didn't expect to happen. Caroline returns in this episode and say goodbye to her folks because this is her last appearance to date in the show. George the Steamroller is back and rude as always, but I'm curious on why the Fat Controller will ride a rude steamroller. As much as I want to mention the scene where the Fat Controller fell into the mud was well edited by the crew. Then after that, all the dirtiness in the Fat Controller went through. He rides in Thomas's cab and he becomes the fireman in order to get to the party on time. But there's an unanswerable question to me here. How did he get clean so fast? Just moments ago we saw him dirty as suit, but now he's so squeaky clean. Then the Fat Controller rides to the party and his wife lost his quote-unquote fancy dress, and then the birthday party starts. Now I want to point this out. There is an outtake or a goof, as most fans call them, about this episode. If you have the Cranky Bugs DVD or VHS, the Namor sequence plays the full Thomas theme song instead of the reduced one. So with that said, this is another good episode of Season 5.
I agreed. I don't have too much to add, but I do love the fact that we have another episode centered around Sir Topham Hatt, and it's also nice to see how much he loves and cares for his wife. There were some funny moments in the episode as well, and I like the ending too. I'll give this episode an 8 out of 10 for a good episode. Episode 109, James and the Trouble with Trees. James is almost crushed by a tree. Here's another episode based on a real-life event. According to David Mayton, there have been instances in which trees have slid down because of the rain and stood upward in the middle of the track before. Anyway, the episode is okay. There's nothing really all that special about the episode itself. The story is a bit dull, but I'll give it credit that it doesn't lose any focus, at least in terms of the main story. And I like the scene of the tree sliding down onto the track. It's another good scene with some good build-up and music, although I think James would have been just fine if the tree came crashing down on him. Also, I highly doubt that his train is really that heavy to be pushed back. Now, this was one of those episodes where I'm split on what rating I should give it, but honestly, I think it deserves a 5 out of 10 for a meh episode. At the very least, I could say this episode is watchable, but it's not as good as I remembered it as a kid.
Well, as I said to Zecoa while I was watching the episode with him, this is the first week episode of Season 5. Yeah, I know a lot of people consider this episode good, but I just don't find it that interesting. Because it didn't make me laugh so much, but it's still fair enough to watch. If you like the episode, then that's great to hear. Episode 110, Gordon and the Gremlin. Gordon collects a VIP and takes her to see the Fat Controller. Well, this episode is good. There are multiple reasons why I like it. First off, this episode marks the introduction of Dowager Hatt in the series, and the first and only appearance of her dog, Gremlin, a woof woof. Secondly, it has a pretty decent plot of Gordon taking a VIP. Now, I know you may be asking, Spencer's coaches are here, but we won't see him until Season 7. I have nothing else to say, so I say this is a good episode, and even though the comedy is a bit light, hey, at least the silence quote made by the Fat Controller is back from Season 4.
I agree, the episode is a good episode. There's a couple of funny moments with some cute moments with the dog as well, and the story is a decent story as well. I don't have too much to add, so I'll give this episode a 7 out of 10 for a good episode 2. Episode 111, By George. George the Steamroller is still being rude to the engines. This was a fine episode. Nothing special, but it was memorable. We get to see George being more rude than he ever was the last time we saw him, but again, he does get a proper punishment at the end. There's a couple of funny moments of Thomas crashing into the chicken house, and I love the chicken sound effect when he crashes into their house. Nothing else to say, so I give this episode a 7 out of 10 for a good episode.
Yes, I agree. The crash scene and the chicken sound were pretty funny to me. George does get his proper punishment to stop being rude to the other engines. Now, Duke Shed from Season 4 returns in a cameo, which is great and useful for background shots. So yeah, this episode is very good to me as well. Episode 112. Bah! Maidway Distress for the Best Dress Station competition. This episode is decently good. The comedy is alright and everything like that. The ram is a little derpy and it's pretty funny to stare at it. Just look at it. Doesn't it look derpy to you? The ending was pretty funny. I love the joke Sir Thomas said, "And I'll eat my hat if you don't like it." The ram eating his hat was a lull scene that killed me off as well. So yeah, let's say what the ram thinks about this episode. Yes, it's a good episode. It's one of those rare Thomas episodes focusing on animals and stations rather than the engines and people. So yeah, overall, good episode to me.
I'm gonna have to slightly disagree on the rating. Yes, the ending with the ram eating Sir Topham Hatt's hat is a funny scene, and the look on the ram and the station looks good, but honestly, this is not a memorable episode to me. Very little stuff happens in the episode, and I felt Percy was a little too rude to Toby when asking what his favorite station is. Now, yes, he does apologize in the end, but honestly, I'm gonna have to give this episode a 5 out of 10. A meh episode. It's not a terrible episode by any means, but I don't find it that good or that memorable. Episode 113, Put Upon Percy. Percy's been put upon, Percy's been put upon, poor old Percy. Okay. Anyway, this was a really solid episode. I like that we get a character moment from Percy, and it's understandable on how he feels that he's been overworked. Plus, the runaway scene and the avalanche scene is one of the most memorable scenes in the show in my opinion. It used to scare me a lot as a kid, but I still found it pretty epic. So with all of Percy's hard work, I give this episode an 8 out of 10 for a good episode.
Well, when the episode started, the rating for this episode for me was on weak territory, but it was far from the horrible territory. As the episode progressed, I kinda liked it more and more. The ending was of course memorable and possibly one of my favorite scenes as a kid. If the rock avalanche wasn't there, then I would give this episode a lower rating. Not too bad, it would have been a weak episode, not a horrible one. So yeah, this is once again another good episode. Episode 114, Toby and the Flood. Toby survives the flood. Well, here we got the first Thomas episode seen by 50% of the Thomas fans as their debut Thomas episode. I got to say, the water kept changing throughout this episode. First it was orange juice, then regular water, and finally tomato juice. And when the episode ends, it's back to muddy water. The scene of the dam breaking was really memorable to watch. I think it was a superb work of art to making that scene possible. So yeah, I have nothing else to say than this episode is yet another good episode, and a nice taste of things to come for future episodes.
Now this episode was a tough one to come up with a rating for. There were so many good things in this episode, but there are also a couple of faults with this episode as well. First, I really loved the build up to the dam about to burst open. With all the camera shots the crew has gotten, as well as the music leading up to the disaster, it was just so good and so epic. And yes, I'm one of those people that got into Thomas because of this episode itself, and I still love it for entertainment purpose. But like I said, there are at least two faults with this episode. First, why didn't Toby just continue to move forward to the end of the bridge? And why doesn't Percy just move out of the way for Toby? Or better yet, why doesn't he just stay on the other side? Now, I'm no scientist, and I'm sure you can argue that the bridge probably would have broken anyway after the dam burst, but I'm sure Toby could have at least easily made it to the other side by this point. Now again, this was a tough episode to give the rating, but with some epic music along with some epic and wonderful rescue scenes, I'm going to give this episode a 6 out of 10 for a light, good episode. Episode 115, Haunted Henry. Henry takes a train onto the old line. This was another atmospheric episode. I like the look on the old line, and again, the music is a perfect fit for the episode. I don't have too much to say on the episode, so I give this episode an 8 out of 10 for a good episode.
I have nothing to say about this episode other than this. Let's give a good episode rating to the friendliest episode on season 5. Episode 116, Double Teething Troubles. A new diesel named Derek has teething troubles. Okay. I can see this episode has some problems, like, how does an engine have a toothache? Hee, silly Percy. Secondly, why didn't the new diesel had his engine checked before arriving at the quarry to work with Bill and Ben? Third and last, Bill and Ben were being grumpy with the diesel, like, he was trying to be friendly. Maybe they didn't like his body, they hate his voice. I have no idea, actually. I think this episode will be our second week episode for me. It's not that bad, let me tell you guys, but it has a very light comedy in it. If they threw a joke or two in it, it would have been a high weak episode or a low good episode. But I don't know what happened here. It's just that this episode, it's not that funny. That's why I call it a weak episode.
I agree, this one was another meh episode to me. I'll admit, the whole toothache thing is pretty silly, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Plus, I think Derek's cooling system was checked. It probably was just because he was pushing himself too hard again. Speaking of Derek, he was really underplayed in this episode. Seriously, after this episode, who even remembers this character? It's a shame too, because he seems like a nice engine, and I wouldn't mind if the team brought him back for maybe 1 or 2 more episodes. Also, I felt like nothing was accomplished in this episode. This is another episode where I know the plot, but I don't find myself enjoying this episode that much. So, I will also give this episode a 5 out of 10 for a meh episode. Episode 117, Stepney Gets Lost. Stepney gets lost and goes to the scrapyard. This episode had a nice idea, but unfortunately it wasn't executed well enough. I still like the look of the scrapyard, and this episode proves that even a Thomas and Friends character can commit murder in this universe. But I have to ask on why Stepney's driver or fireman didn't just left Stepney on a siding, or why didn't one of Stepney's crew went for help and the others stayed with him. There's nothing about it that's terrible, but I don't find this episode that memorable, to be honest. So this is another episode that will get a 5 out of 10, a meh episode.
I'm gonna start by saying that Alec Baldwin narrated this episode better than Angelus. I feel this episode is about murder, that someone had an idea and they put it into an episode. Since this episode pretty much left me with a blank expression, it's gonna be another weak episode for me. Yeah, I like Stepney's Cockney accent, like his voice like saying, "Oh no, we're in the scrapyards." I like that voice a lot, but still, this episode's weak for me. There's not much excitement, and this is about murder, a very touchy topic for kids. Yeah, so that's why I give it a weak rating. Episode 118, Toby's Discovery. Toby discovers an abandoned mine. Right away from reading the title, this is another good episode. Why, you may ask? Well, it's because I love exploring and discovering new places in real life, and also to discover old tombstones from famous people. This episode does capture the meaning of discovery, and overall, I love this episode. So yeah, great episode.
I agree. Any episode that involves exploring or discovering almost guarantees a good episode. All the new places that Toby and Sir Topham have discovered looks really amazing. Although there is one thing about the episode I didn't like, and that's the ending. I felt the ending was a bit too rushed and a bit of a cop-out as well, and it really is a shame that the team only used Bertram for this one scene. It just felt like the writers were running out of ideas on how to end the episode, and they just throw this in at the last minute. Still, the ending doesn't change the fact that the episode will get a 8 out of 10 for a good episode. Episode 119, Something in the Air. Henry takes the flying kipper again, while a high tide is coming in. Okay, I'm calling it right now. The flying kipper is a curse to Henry. Seriously, this is the third episode where he pulls the flying kipper and something bad happens to him. Maybe you should stop pulling the flying kipper. Anyway, I don't have too much to say on the episode. It was a solid episode. I like the look of the beach, and the music and build up to Henry's crash was good, and I like how both Thomas and Henry apologized to each other at the end. So yeah, all around this episode gets an 8 out of 10 for a good episode.
One of the reasons I enjoyed this episode is because it emulates a tsunami when they say the tide was rising. I like the fact controller scold to Henry, like it says, "Engines don't swim, Henry. You're meant to deliver fish, not swim with them. You should know that by now." That has to be one of my favorite quotes from any Thomas episode. So yeah, this is another good episode. Episode 120, Thomas, Percy, and Old Slow Coach. Thomas and Percy save an old coach from being scrapped, but they later save a fire. Okay, this is a really memorable episode to me. Actually, this is the first time Thomas and Percy save a fire, and this is the first time in a while that we're gonna see that in 10 more seasons. So yeah, Thomas and Percy are heroes in this episode, so I have to cheer for them. And the idea of having Old Slow Coach was brilliant. So yeah, this is another good episode for me.
Agreed. While not my most favorite episode, this is still a good episode. We have another character that actually serves a purpose for the episode, and she wasn't just thrown in at the last minute, unlike Toby's discovery. I also like the action going on with the episode with the fire. So yeah, I also give this episode a 7 out of 10 for a good episode. Episode 121, Thomas and the Rumors. The engines are convinced that Harold is going to replace them. Okay, so I could see this episode going both ways for some people. I could see some people liking the episode, and I could see people finding the episode boring. And I'll be honest, when I first saw the episode as a kid, I thought it was alright. However, especially what's going on today with all the rumors and false reporting going all over the media and the internet, I feel that this episode is a very important episode, and it does a great job on how rumors can easily be true to some people, and it can be very easy to trick someone into believing a rumor that's probably not true. I also like the mystery surrounding the visitor and Harold because it makes sense. It wasn't just because the Fat Controller just randomly chose Harold to show a visitor around. He wanted to find some place to make a new playground for the children, and yeah, it makes much more sense to find a place high up in the air than below the ground. And I can believe that some engines like Gordon, Henry, and James will be so quick to jump to conclusions about Harold, just like how some people do when they hear something but they don't know the full story or what is actually going on. This is an episode I felt was really ahead of its time and is so relevant today than it was back then. In fact, the more I think about it, the more I think that this episode is a good episode. So I'm going to give this episode a 10 out of 10 for a great episode.
I do get Zecoa's point in this episode, but I have something to say. And you know what made me land this episode in the bad territory? What killed this episode was Gordon. The crash scene was needed so Gordon and Sheriff could fucking learn their fucking lesson. There are two problems with this thing. One, you don't do that. That's violating the rules. And secondly, you do not ever try to show off to something that's bothering you. You can easily get injured or die instantly. And the engine starts to be, and thanks, Percy, you're not doing any help at all in this episode. Harold's only one helicopter. He can only carry 3 people. Not 800, not 1,000, not 1,000,000, not 1,000,000. Come on, Brick, give us something better than this stupid episode. Obviously, guys, this is a horrible episode, and I do not want to see Gordon showing off again. This started off as a good idea, and it was ruined by Gordon showing off. Episode 122. Oliver's fine. Oliver discovers an abandoned house. You know what? I'm not even gonna say anything to start with the rating. It's good. I love this episode because once again it's about discovering abandoned places. And like I said when I was reviewing Toby's Discovery, I'm a big fan of exploring in real life. It makes me feel special and interesting. Fun fact, James and Henry were supposed to speak in this episode, but the roles ended up being small cameos. Henry pulling the flying caper and James carrying freight. So yeah, this is another great episode.
I agree that this is a good episode. There are a couple of nice moments in the episode, and I like the fact that it continues to show Oliver's struggle with the trucks, and I do like the look of the old station. Although, is this a season of sleeping single men? Also, how did Oliver and his crew not notice that they were going the wrong way? Although, I guess I can excuse you because this is the first time that Oliver is pulling a mail train. Otherwise, I give this episode an 8 out of 10 for a good episode. Episode 123, Happy Ever After. Percy promises Mrs. Kindly to find a good luck package for her daughter's wedding. This was a really sweet episode. Anyone that loves a nice romance story will enjoy this episode. I don't have too much to say. The music was good, and I both awed and laughed when Percy got a kiss from Mrs. Kindly's daughter. It's a shame she doesn't get a name, but regardless, the episode gets a nice, loving 8 out of 10 for a good episode.
You know what? I'm just gonna say the rating good. I love this episode because my girlfriend and I always kiss when the bride kisses Percy. I love this episode for his treasure hunt too. Episode 124, Sir Topham Hatt's holiday. Sir Topham Hatt has a holiday with his wife and children. This was a cool episode to watch. I don't watch this episode very often, but Sir Topham Hatt is much more comical in this episode, like when he ducked because of Tiger Moth's low flying, as well as when he got stuck in the mud. So yeah, I'll give this a good, but only for its comedic aspects.
While this is not my most favorite episode, as I felt this episode has too much plot going on, I do like the idea and there were a couple funny moments in the episode itself, as Toy Bonnie mentioned. So again, while not my favorite, I'll go ahead and give this episode a nice, low, good episode, so a 6 out of 10. Episode 125, A Big Surprise for Percy. The trucks are giving Percy a hard time. If I could sum up this episode with one word, then I think Percy said it best.
Boring.
This is another episode that has a nice idea, but it ended up not being a memorable episode to me. The only thing that saved this episode from getting a low meh episode rating was the chase scene. This is actually one of the most epic chase scenes from the show, and Sir Topham Hatt finally does something for once. But even with the chase, it's not enough for me to still give this episode a meh episode rating, so a 5 out of 10.
If I could use a rating for this episode, it's horrible. Why is it horrible? Because it's slow and boring. The chasing didn't even help it. So yeah, this is another bad episode for me. But it's not as bad as Thomas and the Rumors. I explained how bad that episode was. So anyways, let's move on. Episode 126, Make Someone Happy. Mrs. Kindly is taken to a fairground after her sister declines to stay with her. One thing I'm gonna say is how bad I feel for Mrs. Kindly. I know how that feeling feels when someone can't stay with you. Now, onto the episode. Don't worry, we're back to good episodes with this episode. Now, one more thing. Say goodbye to Kirk Ronan because Narration is going to be back in the next season, so enjoy Gordon's panoramic view for a last time. Last but not least, I do like the Hammond B3 organ of the song. Fun fact, I did play the Hammond B3 organ before, and the first song I played on it was the Thomas theme song, so I recognized it as fast as possible. So yeah, this is another very, very good episode.
I don't have too much to say about the episode. It's a good episode with a nice moral about making someone happy does cheer someone up. And as someone that did cheer up one of my friends a few times, I can safely say that the moral is very true. So I'll go ahead and give this episode a 7 out of 10 for a good episode. Episode 127, Busy Going Backwards. Toad wants to go forward and the freight cars makes that wish happen. Oh boy, this is a fun episode. As a kid, I would rewatch this episode again and again just to see that runaway alone. I think this is the longest runaway we have ever seen from this show. Now, I can understand if some people find this episode a bit repetitive because, like I said, the runaway is a bit too long and, yeah, great job there, conductor. You're gonna get a promotion at work. But if you don't think too hard and you just sit back and relax, then this episode is a fun episode overall. So I give this fun ride an 8 out of 10 for a good episode.
Yes, everybody, this is another good episode. I don't have anything to say since Zecoa said all the stuff I was going to say. Episode 128, Duncan Gets Spooked. Duncan's crew play a trick on Duncan. Guys, this is my favorite episode of the season because of one simple thing I watched prior to work on this review. A YouTube poop made by the real Xbox nerd. He did such a great job with that YouTube poop that I was actually looking forward to reviewing this episode. So yeah, let's talk about the episode's comedy. I like Duncan's woo! It's really funny, as well as the trick the crew played on Duncan. It was well thought. Now, critically viewing this episode, it would have been weak if the "It's the Ghost, take me back please" quote wasn't there. So I played this episode in a very high good rating for its comedy. Also, that YouTube poop of the episode was so funny, especially the bridge scene where Duncan saw and got scared of the infamous YouTube red man that appears when your videos get taken down because of copyright. So yeah, this is my favorite episode of the whole season 5, but that's not exactly everybody's favorite episode. I've seen people claiming it as one of their least favorites of season 5.
Well, with the whole YouTube poop thing aside, I actually do like this episode too, mostly for the atmosphere this episode brings. Also, this is a pretty dark episode due to Rusty's story. Again, it's pretty much saying that, yeah, even engines can die in this universe. But I also love the Firefly effects the team did, and there were lots of funny moments in this episode as well, that I'm giving this episode a 9 out of 10 for a great episode. Episode 129, Rusty and the Boulder. Or maybe it's 130. Yeah, the Thomas Wiki mentions that this episode is trending 9 in terms of when it aired on TV, but it's the last episode of season 5 in terms of production. Anyway, this episode is about Boulder destroying a quarry for some reason. Alright, I'm gonna be honest in that I loved this episode as a kid, mainly because of the Boulder chase scene and the crash, and I don't think this episode is as bad as some people are making it out to be, but that doesn't mean it's a good episode when you think about it critically. There are a lot of plot holes in this episode, and it all has to do with the Boulder. First off, what is the deal with this Boulder? Why does it even have a face to begin with? Is there a spirit that lives inside of Boulder? Is this the ghost engine that Rusty mentioned to Duncan in the last episode that he now came back as a Boulder? And how is it able to move on its own? I mean, it's one thing if it rolled down the mountain, but moving on its own? Also, why does he want to destroy this quarry so badly? Was this his original hometown and someone did something horrible to it and he doesn't want it to happen again? Does he just hate engines and people in general? Or does he just not like the quarry? When you have something as a Boulder and it's pretty clear that he's some sort of character, you need some sort of backstory or an explanation as to why he's alive. You can't just say, oh well, he's alive because the plot said so. Also, why is a Boulder the only reason Britt and David decided to get rid of the mine? There's plenty of other reasons they could have went for to have this mine closed. They could have said that there was some sort of huge rock slide caused by Thumper, and it was so bad that Topham had decided to close the mine. Again, I don't think this episode is that bad, but there are too many problems with this episode, and I still have to call it a bad episode, so I'll give it a 3 out of 10. But like Busy Going Backwards, if you don't think too much about the story, then you'll find this episode at least passable because it is at least watchable. I'll give it that much.
A very confusing plot this episode indeed has. But I'm confused. Why does Boulder want to get rid of the engines? Is he the king of the railway? Does he want to kill Thumper besides this being his only appearance on the show? Then get rid of Thumper, Boulder, not Rusty. So yeah, I'll give this episode a very low, weak rating. What saved this episode from being horrible was the chase scene and the jet explosion. Episode 130, Snow, or going by production order, episode 129. Rusty tells the story when Skarloey survived a huge avalanche. This is an interesting episode on how it's dangerous to have parties or feasts on dangerous places like caves and even snow mountains. However, how did Skarloey get divided in half? That's an unanswerable question, but without that interfering with the last episode of Season 5 is a very, very good episode. Okay, Zecoa, let's hear your thoughts on the last episode of the season, please.
Well, if the moral of this episode is don't have parties in dangerous places like near a mountain during the episode, then it did a great job, because just how stupid is this driver? Seriously, this is the same driver that said, oh look, the snow looks dangerous if we stay here, so let's have cocoa in the middle of the track. Could they really not have waited until they got to the station to enjoy cocoa? Now, you're probably thinking that I might give this a bad episode rating, but no, I give it a meh episode rating, a 5 out of 10. Even with the driver's stupid logic in this episode, I still love the look on the snow, and the music, and of course the build-up to the avalanche, which, once again, handled really well in this episode. And that is every episode of Season 5 reviewed.
Let's count to see how many good, meh, and bad episodes we've had. Zecoa, since this is your video, you'll go first.
Alright, well, if you take a look at my rating chart for this season, Season 5 had 19 good episodes, 6 meh episodes, and 1 bad episode. So my ratings for this season is almost similar to Season 3, except this season had more meh and less bad episodes than Season 3, which I was really surprised by just how many meh episodes there were in Season 5. And again, some of these episodes were pretty tough for me to think about what rating I should give them, but these are my final thoughts on every episode, and this is what I thought about them. So, Toy Bonnie, what does your chart look like?
Okay, what I counted are 20 good episodes, 4 weak episodes, and 2 horrible episodes. Let me tell you guys, those 2 bad episodes are nowhere as good as being the best of the season. Thomas and the Rumors is such a bad episode, and a big surprise for Percy is a boring episode as hell. So those 2 bad episodes is what I will dismiss from Season 5 Marathon.
Alright, well now it's time for our top 5 episodes. This was a bit hard to pick, but these are my favorite episodes from Season 5. Number 5, A Better View for Gordon. I love this episode mainly for the crash and Gordon's character in this episode. Number 4, Duncan Gets Spooked. I like the atmosphere centered around the Iron Bridge, and the story was really good in this episode. Number 3, Lady Hatt's Birthday. A loving episode that really shows how much Sir Topham Hatt and his wife love each other. Number 2, Busy Going Backwards. This one is mostly a guilty pleasure, but I just can't get enough of this runaway theme in this episode. It's just so much fun. And number 1, Thomas and the Rumors. This is one of those episodes where the more I watch it, the better the episode just keeps on getting. And I think this is an episode that everyone should watch for the moral. Alright, now let's see what Toy Bonnie's favorite episodes are for this season.
Okay, I worked on this list when I got back from my junior prom at 12 a.m. So here we go. Number 5, Oliver's Fine. Great episodes to feature Oliver taking the mail, and it's a real nice ending of Sir Topham Hatt looking at an abandoned house. Number 4, Toby's Discovery. Another one that is about discovery and a classic where Bertram appears for one time. Number 3, Makes Someone Happy. I love the Hammond B3 organ version of the theme song in this episode, plus Mrs. Kindly's adventure throughout Sodor, plus the carnival fun. Number 2, Happy Ever After. I love the treasure hunt in this episode, plus the bride kissing Percy. It reminds me a lot of my current girlfriend, which I love with my dear heart. And number 1, Duncan Gets Spooked. The YouTube who made this go on number 1. That's all. Well, it's time to talk about the directing. David Minton said in his interview that Season 5 was his season to show off his modeling skills, and wow, indeed it was. I'm impressed. He did such a great job in this season. Let's see what Zecoa thinks about him.
I agree. I think that both David and his crew did a fine job once again in directing this season. And I really love the camera work for this season, especially for the dramatic scenes they got, which really make the episodes stand out more. And it's no wonder why I loved this show so much when I was a kid.
Alright, time to pick our top 5 favorite songs from the season. I'll go first. I have to give an honorable number 6 mention to Every Cloud Has a Silver Lining. I like this song, but I don't listen to it quite less often than the others. So yeah, here we go in my top 5. Number 5, Come for the Ride. One hell of a good song, and it feels like you're going on a roller coaster of musical instruments while listening to it. Number 4, Accidents Will Happen. Catchy song that really tells how accidents can really happen. Number 3, Night Train. A nice catchy tune for people who like relaxing melodies. Number 2, Harold the Helicopter. This song is very emotional to me as it reminds me of my paternal grandfather who fought in the Vietnam War. I miss my grandpa that I have to listen to this song a lot to remember him. And number 1, Snow Song. Since winter is my favorite season, this obviously had to go on number 1. I love the percussion to this song as well as the snowy feel to it. Well, Zecoa, what are your favorite songs from Season 5? Let's hear what you have.
Well, before I do that, let me just say that Micah Jr. really did such a nice job to the soundtrack for this season. The new music they used for some of the disaster scenes were just fantastic. Now, as for the music videos and the songs for this season, I like pretty much all the songs for this season. If I had to choose my favorites, I would go with, in no particular order, Night Train, mainly for the instruments this song uses, the Snow song for having such a nice feature of both winter and snow, and Accidents Will Happen for being the first Thomas song I've ever listened to as a kid.
Now it's time to talk about the narration. Let's start with Michelangelo's. He had a lot of energy like in seasons 3 and 4. I noticed that in the first few episodes of the season, he gave Cranky a really big voice. I give him points for that. So yeah, Michelangelo's did a pretty good job in this season. Now Zecoa, what do you think about Michelangelo's?
I agree. I think Angelus really stepped up his narration skills for this season. There were still some moments in the episodes where I wish he tried a little more harder, but he did do a decent job for this season. As for Alec Baldwin, I think he did a good job in this season as well. Now, I can understand why some people find him a bit dull, especially for some of the voices he gives for certain engines. Honestly, I didn't like his Bill and Ben voice that much, but I'll give him credit that he's at least trying for this season, and there are some voices I do like his voice for Oliver, Toad, Sir Topham Hatt, but overall I think both Angelus and Baldwin did a fine job for this season.
Baldwin did a great job on this season. It's a lot better than his season 6 narration. He gave Stepney a Cockney accent, which was perfect and really made me laugh. So yeah, he's the perfect choice for season 5. Now to finish off this review, it's time to give the season its overall rating. Alright, my overall rating of season 5 is good. Yeah, there were a lot of good episodes plus a few weak episodes. So yeah, the comedic and memorable aspects added to the goodness of the season equals a good season rating. Alright, we're getting close, and I'm starting to fear that there will be a season that the horrible episodes will surpass the good ones. Alright, Zecoa, time to finish this up. Let's hear your rating.
Well, considering how many good episodes there were in this season, top off with some good directing and good soundtrack, I think it's safe to say that this season still holds up as one of my favorite seasons overall for the show. Yes, there were some weak episodes here and there, and I can see why some people say the crashes in this season was a little too much, but this season is still as memorable and as watchable as I remember them to be. So I would also give this season a fresh 7 out of 10 for a good season. I really appreciate Britt and David trying new ideas for the show, and I think it really paid off for them a lot more better than season 3. Now again, it could just be my biased self talking because this is the season that started my love for the show in the first place, but I really do believe that this is a good season, and I will always love these episodes no matter what, even the ones that have major problems in them. And with that, we are done with Season 5 of Thomas and Friends. Thank you so much, Toy Bonnie, for taking the time and reviewing this season with me. It's been a lot of fun doing this review with you.
No problem, Zecoa. It was fun digging through a season that I didn't like that much as a kid, but now you showed me that Season 5 is one of the greatest seasons of Thomas. I learned my lesson now, and I want to thank you for inviting me over.
Well, anyways, as always, I would like to thank the viewers for watching and reviewing the work I put onto YouTube, and I hope you've enjoyed this crossover season review as well. Anyways, as always, if you guys got any shows or movies you would like for me to check out, let me know either from YouTube or onto my Facebook page, which the Facebook page will be in the description. And if you guys like Let's Plays, check out my gaming channel. Also, don't forget to check out Toy Bonnie's videos. I'll put his channel link in the description below as well. So, until next time, this is Zecoa the Diesel.
And that Toy Bonnie guy?
And we'll see you people later in our next videos. Take care, everybody.